Good morning and welcome to the Tom Brokaw News Center here at Universal City. I'm Conan. Nolan. Hope you are in good health. With us is the California State Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon. So, Mr. Speaker, nice to see you. A lot to get to, but first, much of the state remains on fire. Hundreds of homes have been lost. There have been deaths, and of course, there's the apocalyptic-like skies in the Bay Area and down here in Southern California. While everyone is talking about this being the result of climate change and global warming, there are other issues. The insurance industry, for example, has said we continue to build and rebuild homes in too many fire-prone areas, the so-called urban-rural interface. They can't insure those homes anymore. The state has stepped in last year and forced them to offer policies for at least one more year. That year ends in a few months. What is the legislature doing about this?
Well, the legislature tried to address this problem. Specifically, our insurance chair, Tom Daly from Orange County, tried to address this problem during this last legislative session. Unfortunately, the bill died on the Senate side, but it's certainly something that we're going to continue to look at. There is a program, a state program called the FAIR program, which provides some insurance for folks who are denied fire insurance, and that's certainly an option for some people. But we want to continue to work on this topic in the future.
Right. Among the bills that failed to pass at the end of the legislative session was a stripped-down $500 million wildfire appropriation bill that would have provided for forest cleanup, home protection projects, emergency shelters, warning systems, but you personally killed that bill, saying there needed to be hearings first. What do you say to those who believe we don't have time for hearings? The need is now. The bill should have passed.
The problem with that bill is it would have required us to suspend the Constitution because it would have been introduced 72 hours prior to the end of the session. It would have violated our Constitution. And it was introduced without any budget hearings. If you're going to take $500 million out of our general fund, then that means you're taking money out of mental health, you're taking money out of education, early childhood education, all those other programs that we care about as a state. So it was important for me that we provide vetting of the proposal before we introduce it.
We've been good at suppressing fires for decades. That has resulted in a vast accumulation of underbrush and forests. We've been trying to do something about that, but experts such as Professor Max Moritz at UC Santa Barbara say we're not doing it fast enough. Those efforts haven't been implemented fast enough. What's the legislature's response?
We've provided significant financial resources to clearing undergrowth, underbrush, and those types of efforts within the forest. We did that a couple of years ago in a piece of emergency legislation. We're continuing to do that. We're continuing to work with CAL FIRE as well and our forestry efforts in order to make sure that we continue to address those efforts.
So there are a lot of accomplishments in the past legislative session. You gave renters a break from evictions because of COVID. You extended paid family leave, a strict ban on flavored tobacco. Police shootings of unarmed individuals will now be reviewed by the state. There's a ban on the use of chokeholds. But big police reform failed, such as a bill to permanently strip the badge from any officer convicted of certain crimes or abuse. Time ran out on that bill that would have made more complaints of police violence subject to records. The impression is that members of the Democratic majority didn't want to vote for some of these bills, but they didn't want to incur the wrath of progressives. So you helped them run out the clock so that they could say, listen, we simply didn't have enough time.
It's not the case. It's not true. That bill didn't have the votes. That bill never had the votes. It was a bill that I was going to vote for. I told two police chiefs in my district that I was going to vote for it. Unfortunately, it just didn't have the votes it needed to pass our House. It was never ready to come up for a vote. It was a really tough bill for a lot of our members, and something I'm committed to working on next year. I've spoken to potential authors about looking at that bill.
Your Democratic colleague who runs the state Senate, Toni Atkins, the pro tem, accused you of running out the clock on her housing bill that would have allowed for duplexes in single-family neighborhoods. The Assembly voted on it and sent it over to the Senate 3 minutes before the deadline. It failed. That there's bad blood between your house and hers. Have you spoken with Senator Atkins since the end of the session?
Always bad feelings between the Senate and the Assembly at the end of session. This year, I think with COVID, a lot of that was more pronounced than ever. Pro Tem and I have done great work together on the issue of housing. She's been a legislative champion on the issue. We're going to continue to keep pushing this issue in the future. As far as that specific bill is concerned, again, this is a bill that I supported. Unfortunately, it was very controversial. You had a lot of Democrats standing up and speaking out against it. Again, we did great work, just like police reform. We did great work on housing in the Assembly this year. We passed legislation to incentivize housing production. We expanded the number of affordable housing units, legislation to protect landlords and tenants during the COVID crisis. We allowed religious institutions to build affordable housing. It was a good year for housing.
And finally, you have been vilified for forcing a nursing mother, Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks of Oakland, to appear in person for a housing vote around midnight with her newborn infant after she had asked to vote by proxy. You later apologized for that. What did you learn from that experience?
Well, what I want to be clear about on this point is that I never required anybody to be present on the Assembly floor against their wishes. Ms. Wicks herself has said time and time again, including in the New York Times, that I didn't force her to be there, and she was granted medical leave. What I have apologized to Ms. Wicks for was accepting a limited interpretation of our proxy voting policy. Again, I'd never force someone to be on the floor who didn't feel safe being there. We had several members who were absent the last night of session for that very reason. And ultimately, Ms. Wicks and I were focused on the same thing. She was there to make sure that she voted on key bills, and I was focused on protecting the validity of the votes. My concern was that the passage, not only for paid family leave, but for the housing bills, the police reform package that we talked about earlier, that could be thrown out by the courts. The GOP had already threatened to sue us over proxy voting. Other organizations had threatened to sue us over proxy voting. Ms. Wicks was the only member to request a proxy, and her voting by proxy in violation of our House rules could have undone the enactment of all of those bills. And our own legal counsel asserted that the threat of that was considerable and was real.
Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, Democrat of Paramount, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.